Should we start?
Yes.
Okay, good. Before we go into the actual discussions, which I think would be quite heated again, because it is something very topical, something very polemical, something that has, polarized opinions for a very long time. I would start with something that he mentioned. Sorry, your name from Tripura? Yes. Chotal. Something that Chotal said, that history, it's difficult to separate history from fiction. So yes, I will pick on that because I don't know if you're familiar with the work of an anthropologist or political theorist called Michel Rolf-Trouillot, who unfortunately died very young, and he was unwell before that. His book is called Silencing the Past, Power in the Production of History, and there he is talking precisely about this. How history is about telling stories, of course, narration. He says that the difference between history and fiction lies in one small thing, but which is very important, which is history. Despite the fact that it accepts that it's interpretive, that there can be many versions of the same event and same stories, never kind of doubts the fact that of the something which happened. Okay, which is not, a problem of fiction at all. So he says it very clearly that history is aware of the fact that there's a tension that lies at its core. And what is the tension? It's a tension which cannot be resolved ever. That while it claims to, recover or narrate what happened, right? It is very aware that what it can narrate is what is that which is said to have happened. Meaning that gap between action and narration will always remain. But even with this tension, it is not, history is never questioning. Not only not questioning, that history cannot function without this idea of men and women acting, actual actors, agents, human beings, right? Acting, which is, as you know, which is not a problem of fiction. Even when they draw upon real life, we know they often do. So there's a very close interrelation, but that is the distinction he points out. And from there, he goes on to say that because of this and because of the power, the events we select, how we decide to narrate something, I said, what we narrate, always enter history through silences. And there would always be major silences. And that is the power, because that depends on the power of our selection, or also depends on what we can recover how. It's not just on the power of selection. And since history is very aware of this tension, history has constantly, the discipline of history is meant to be very conservative. Actually, there's been constant self-reflection and within the discipline itself as to how do we recover what we want to recover. Which is why when I said that, yes, it is interpretation, but there's also a method, a rigor that has to be followed, right? And then, of course, it's interpretive. I mean, no one now claims that it's no one believes in Ranke, no one now believes in positivist history, right? It is interpretive. And the other thing that John Kelly has said, which I like, he said history from the time, if you think of a linear kind of line or strain of history that comes down, let's say from the Greek Herodotus and Thucydides, he says there's always been two phases. One is the analytic one is the interpretive or the hermeneutic one, with Herodotus obviously representing the hermeneutic one. So history very much takes it for granted that there will be interpretation of whatever you collect, you dig up. That is not in question. But how you do it, the way you go about it, that is what has caused debates among historians. I just thought I'll mention this at the beginning. Yes. Okay. Now, as I said, I bring my bag, but today I'm not even taking out my notes because this is the subject I know quite well because I've written about it, and two, I want you to participate. Okay, so coming back to the idea of not just the nation now, nation and nation state, which is a very powerful kind of entity. Because often, although we put the hyphen, we often clarify that we put the hyphen because they are not the same, right? But yet they are not, yet they come together in very powerful ways at, constantly, let's say, at different moments, right? So the state often draws its legitimacy from the notion of the nation as an imagined community with shared cultural roots, which we were talking about. On the other hand, the nation again, kind of, we think it fulfills itself through statehood, which is not necessarily true, which is why I was saying that, why should we think of everything as nationalism or subnationalism or linguistic nationalism or regional nationalism, right? Because not all of these imaginings actually are thinking of, statehood at some point in the future. But when the two come together in this way, the nation and the state in the sense of a strong territorial unit with its integrity and sovereignty, is when you have a move towards uniformity and standardization, homogenization. No, it hasn't. It's here. Yeah? Okay. Sorry. Yeah? Okay. So these are often, this idea of the territorial integrity of the state can cause, several moves towards a very uniform nation. And the case of India, as I said, is particularly in this sense interesting and fascinating, because as I said, because of the diversity of our population, the enormity of our population, because of various reasons, right? And the experience of the process of becoming independent, we started on the notion of a plural society, right? We started on the notion of a plural society, and yet, and that's been a tension which again we cannot resort. All our, let's say, the political leaders, the framers of the constitution, they never doubted the British structure of a very strong center. Something I had raised earlier. I said we that somehow held together. And good that you brought up, what happened prior to the coming of the British. Precisely, we somehow held together. It was a totally decentralized structure, except for periods of, as we know, Magadhs, but even before that, the Shakas and the Kushanas in the northwest, they're often in Afghanistan. I mean, not even what we can remember. Okay, then we have, centered around Magadha, but then we have different dynasties where, if you look at early history of any region, frontiers are constantly shifting. So this will go to tell you that, this coming together of a collective identity around territory is something extremely new. And it happens with the emergence of modern governing states. So when the British come, they come with a very different idea, not the East India Company. If you read those debates, because as I said, for a work of mine, I had to go into those details. The East India Company directors, the British Parliament, they're actually questioning. They're saying these are young merchants, totally untrained in administration. Why are they doing this, right? They should fall back, which is why they retain the Mughal structure. Initially, they retain, the Naib Nazim of Shiraz, all that. But there are debates actually. Are they really prepared to do this? But on the other hand, along with free trade, they also come with the notion of monopoly. It's very interesting. It's not just the British. Huh? The Portuguese come first. The Portuguese come and they try to impose a system of cartas, which is a kind of monopoly, which was something new. There were Armenians from before, there were Gujaratis, as you know, the Indian Ocean trade region. Indian Ocean was extremely important for trade. We speak of globalization now. The Indian Ocean world was a globalized world, which is why I said when you speak of, who came from outside, when, how, etc., we have, in Calcutta, we have such old Armenian churches, right? I mean, we forget all that. So think of the Bandel Church, think of all kinds of histories. Just the history of Calcutta, which is meant to be a totally colonial city, you will find several Calcuttas, you will find several pasts and several history, right? So when they come, they try to introduce a system of monopoly, which was totally new. And there are people who have worked on that earlier period of merchants. What else do they do? So all the European companies, the moment they get hold of one particular region, I'm sorry, they are trying to do away with the several different, chokis, the customs and toll houses of the local rulers. Because for them, it's a hindrance. Because if you constantly have to go pay tolls, but they come with a notion of order and discipline and centralized power, which what I was trying to say is I don't think it existed in the way earlier. Mughal state was a Mughal state. This is better, or I use this. He asked me to put it in the fold of my sack. Yes. Fine. Better now? Okay. Okay. But he put this on because he said apparently for the recording, the sound's not coming from.
Yeah.
So that's horrible. Should I have it? No. Sure. Okay. Fine. So that was the Mughal system was a system of checks and balances. As I mentioned, the Mughal emperor was one among many. He was supreme, but he was one among many. And it rested on a very delicate balance and negotiation. Some were under your direct rule, not all. They even accepted zamindars and jagirdars that were hereditary. And huge parts of India that did not ever come under direct rule. Okay? So we have to keep all this in mind, which is why I was pointing that how far did Aurangzeb reach? Just the tip, let's say the northern tip of the south. Guptas are the only one we can think of for a long, who had kind of covered a lot of India. Otherwise, who? If you look at the struggles over power, the Rashtrakutas, it's around Magadh. Where is it? So we didn't have, and yet it held together. So the important question to ask is, what were the senses? How did it hold together, right? And that's my point. That why is it that we did not, think of an earlier structure where it was decentralized and not a centralized, strong, centralized state? We couldn't think of that for whatever reason. It's not that no one suggested it. Gandhi certainly did, but there were other leaders also who were speaking of a much more decentralized, a true federal structure. We didn't accept it because neither Nehru nor Ambedkar were in favor of that. Both of them had very strong faith in the state. Okay. So these are the questions we were asking now. But the problem is, one, it is very difficult to be managed. If the Mughals didn't do it, the British did a lot more. But as I said, even at the time of Indian independence, 1/3 or 1/4 of India's territories were under the princes. So even the British, 100 years of colonial rule couldn't do it. Direct colonial, 90 years, they couldn't do it. But we want to do it, and we've done it in various ways. Often we have coerced, some have joined, as you know, you said the kings and princes were given a choice of joining, but often the choice was not a choice, dependent on where. So we have somehow managed to do it. So this somehow is not working. That's the point. There was, somehow, the somehow became important because India's freedom became important at that moment. As I said, there were very different visions. We are not even taking into consideration what the very ordinary people thought of free India as or being in a free country. Right? let's forget that completely. Even amongst the leaders, there were very different visions of what free India should be like. But again, we somehow pulled it together because we thought, independence is the goal and independence will resolve everything. Independence, of course, has not resolved everything. And these are the problems which will come up again and again. I mean, there's nothing. I don't see that it's a crisis or it's terrible, it's bad. The point is, how do we face up to this reality? How do we face up to the reality of these existing tensions? Tensions that have been existing for a very long time. And it's only then that, when we come to terms with it, that we can take measures that would be, let's say, acceptable to a lot of people. So some of these debates also, the ones we are going to discuss today, also come from that idea of who, what, how, how do you deal with heterogeneity? As I said, that there are two models. Once you say, and you can say that French society is a small society. No, people do it. After the problem with the veil, that's precisely what critics pointed out, that France is yet to come to terms with its colonial past. England, on the other hand, because of us, because of South Asians, because of many other things, have been forced to come to terms with its colonial past. But France, that's what they said, that it's the high time that France took very seriously its colonial past and probably would deal with difference in a very different way. An Indian model, in that sense, is totally different. We accept that there is great diversity, and yet we build bridges along those diversities. So, community in this sense, or communitarian symbols of community, signs of community, signs of difference, should not have been a problem in India. That's how we start. And this we know, as I said, on the two main features of the Constitution, which marks it out from many others. One is, liberal equality to all, special privileges, positive discrimination, we call it, compensatory discrimination, reservation for some groups whom, of course the British had marched out, no doubt about it. It's very interesting, when they are calling themselves the non-Brahmins, before the changeover to Dalit, depressed classes. It's a total, complete takeover from that idea of depressed classes. But then with Dalit, it's given, it's imbued with the very powerful significance of being, exploited. Dalan, right? Which is, so there's a, even if it's taken over, it's renewed with, it's given renewed significance, which just makes it completely different. But as we all know, we have gone over it again and again. Ambedkar wanted it as a guarantee of social justice. Okay, justice was the key word, and if you look at the preamble of the Indian Constitution, again, I looked at it, from my work, I thought it was the idea of equality to confer substantive equality, not just empty, liberal equality. But no, it was justice. Justice comes first. We, the people of India, we have come together. First of all, it's a republic. So we, the people of India, it's like, no one else is framing the Constitution. We, the people of India, we have come together to confer on ourselves or guarantee to us, first comes justice. Number one is justice. So even more than the idea of substantive equality, I think they started on the notion of social justice. Again, I think they were, because it's a late constitution, they are aware of the fact that economic justice, no one ever thought of it, to be very honest. And most democracies function in capitalist societies, right? Most, not all. So economic justice is not possible. But what we can give is to, like at least improve in the line of social justice. And Nehru, Ambedkar, many others felt that it could come through education and employment. It has backfired now. I'm sorry, the more, greater the assertion on the part, let's say, of lower caste and Brahmins, the greater has been, our prejudices for, as I said, for what Faisal calls, a fear, rightly or wrongly, but there is a fear that we are losing ground. Right? So what they felt was, if you look at any theory of justice, It is based on mutual respect. And that is what has gone completely awry. Where is the respect? There's no respect. We have warring factions. We have really belligerent factions, absolutely no respect. It's hatred, it's violence. So there is no common ground, unfortunately. So what has happened now, should not mean that what they started with was completely wrong. Maybe they couldn't foresee. Maybe they also didn't realize that in a country with a population like India, it could go in any direction, right? So that's one. The other one is legal pluralism. Once this Pakistan decision, once we are moving towards, the partition of India, although it's a very last one, people are discussing what's going to happen to the minorities. And you'd be very surprised, Jinnah, who, as we know, was not a practicing Muslim and who didn't believe in it, the first speech he gives to his, to New Pakistan, he's saying, but it has to be secular. And can you believe it? The people who, they're like in total incomprehension. Saying, but then why did we fight and, give our blood and all this? What's the point? Right? So, they didn't understand. They didn't understand because I think even they couldn't get Jinnah's point of being treated as a nationality. That's what many people are saying, that, it's not necessarily Jinnah wanted a separate territory. Circumstances later forced, and what we often forget is that the Muslim majority provinces, even large chunks of the people there who are non-Muslims are also supporting the partition decision. That's the part of the story that is often not mentioned. Okay. So, history, yes, history, all narrations, all actions enter history through huge silences, what I said. So that's something. So, but there is talk of what will happen to the minorities. Because by now, again, as I said, it's a state of mind, but minority. And Veena Das says it very clearly that even the international community could not come to any agreed definition of the minority. As I said, it's a state of mind. It's not just about numbers. But unfortunately, what has happened and what tends to happen is that it has become about numbers. It has become about numbers. So with this, the idea of protecting. So the idea was what she was mentioning. It's neutral. It's not neutrality. What was thought of was principled distance. Something that Rajiv Bhargav has said very nicely. It's principled distance from all religions, but at the same time a respect for all. Which is why, as I said, when the American professor told me that all religious holidays are holidays, it's so wonderful to see that in India. That's also one way of being, let's say, showing respect. It doesn't have to be separate from church and state. So it was in that very sense. It was an extremely vulnerable, not just vulnerable, it was very vulnerable and scared Muslim minority, but a very large minority, of course, because Muslims were there in all parts, all over India, and it's not just the two provinces. Yes, exactly. And as I said, these are the ironies of history. The people in UP, who wanted, prestige, status, etc., they were never sure that they'll, so it was just an ideal, a state where you could actually live like a pure Muslim. They were almost certain that they probably wouldn't ever be able to know that. So, and then there were many others. So the point is, they were actually, given the tremendous magnitude of violence and tragedy of the partition, which overtook both the nations for several years, not just right now, there is discussion of how you make them feel secure. And you also had to give not just the Muslim minority, which was the most vulnerable then, but also the others. So the idea of the republic, someone mentioned, you did not need to put the word secular in the preamble then, because it was assumed. It was kind of just assumed that of course we will, respect others. And Ashish Gandhi, in his very provocative way, says that since the time the word has been added to the preamble, is the time that we have. That since the time it's been added to the preamble, violence and everything has gone up. Of course, again, it's a very provocative statement, but people said it in this way. But why was there no need to add it? I thought again, we were mistaken. We're speaking of elite leaders, but it was their common sense that of course we will protect. It was a decision. So, but don't think that it went unchallenged. As you know, the people questioned. They said, if we have to protect or give respect to all religious communities, again see the division. When I mentioned very briefly that caste and class caste and religion had become what Bernard Cohn says beautifully, the sociological keys to the understanding of Indian society. He says what all the surveys of British rule does, all the surveys, what they do is to map. This is different sense of mapping. Map the population of India on particular registers. And he says again very beautifully that you have been assigned a role, your sociological role, in the map of India in that sense. So, criminal tribe, of course, you tend to do this. Martial race, of course, you tend to do this. Effeminate Bengali, of course, you are naturally prone to doing this. So he says that you have been assigned a particular role in the sociological drama, let's say, of Indian society. So caste and religion, by the end of the 19th century, had become, unfortunately, the sociological keys to the understanding of Indian society, which again we accept completely. Why? Because the institutional reforms that are being promised are based on these classifications, right? So by the time of the independence, these cannot be questioned. Somehow these are not questioned. So minorities are religious minorities, but the question is raised that if we respect all religions, then it should also apply to Hinduism, to the Hindus, not Hinduism. Which is why, as you know, the four communities that have their personal laws are Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and Parsis, because the Sikhs and Buddhists were kind of thought of as being part of Hindu, which is not quite true, as you know. I mean, try and tell a Sikh that now, particularly after 1984, but that's the idea. We still continue with that. So what does this mean? So what was thought of then as an original contribution of the Indian Constitution, because not just original, a very daring step on the part of the Indian Constitution, which is bringing together apparently completely incompatible concepts, ideas, and practices, meaning liberal equality along with qualification of, our reservation, and again equality before law along with the collective rights of communities, has in the actual workings, we'll discuss, has produced several innumerable problems, tensions, confusions, fights, debates, right? So that is what we are talking about. So I'll plant it this way. So the main question before us, even for, then you talk about Veena Das. Veena Das is bringing up these key questions. She's writing, as you know, in 1989, the book is coming up, right? So she is writing about critical events. She is bringing up key questions of the very notion of right, which is why I just very quickly say this and stop there. She's saying that the very notion of liberal rights is poised on the individual. Who grants the rights? The state, the nation state, and to whom? To the individual. So she's saying that although the international community agrees for various reasons that there are minorities, vulnerable minorities, who need to be protected, through this granting of special privileges. One, they cannot come to a great definition of the minority, because, as I said, you do not know who feels vulnerable, or wronged against, precarious, when extremely difficult to track. And two, it puts the entire notion of rights into tension. So who is the subject of this right? the individual, or the individual as a member of a collective, or the collective? So she's asking very important questions. So if we say, and that's why she brings in Bruno, that it's total dependence, the caste, the Varna system, the structure of, then if we say that the individual in this sense cannot be understood as, the self-sufficient individual without reference to the collective, right? So you say, yes, it is the individual, but the individual only as a member of that collective. Then what happens to the individual when what we think is the collective that needs to be given special rights or needs to be protected turns against the individual? What does the individual do then? That's the question she's asking. Something that happened with Shaban, that's why she's bringing up with Rup Kamar. So what? And to be honest, the feminist struggle, or even women's studies, not just the struggle, faced a tremendous dilemma around Shabano, post Shabano, and they have emerged mature, much more mature out of that, because this was precisely the same thing, that if you say uniform code, you realize that you are pushing towards forced homogenization. On the other hand, if you say support the collective, uphold collective rights, you also realize that these very rights can turn against, and in most cases, against women. Why? Because you know what these personal laws are. Again, it goes back to first Governor General Warren Hastings. Warren Hastings had been in the, knew the Nawabs of Bengal, he knew, so he had a totally different idea from the later governors. He thought, he had a faith in the ancient Mughal constitution. He thought that these were very refined, cultured people, etc., etc. So he's saying that we should not have the natives of the land, governed by our laws forcibly. But wait, civil criminal law, of course not. Only that small part of the law that in England was thought of as family law, ecclesiastical law, only that part was retained, as something where the natives should govern themselves. And we have followed the same system. If we are thinking of personal laws and we create so much commotion about it, it's not criminal law, it's not regular, it relates to inheritance. Marriage, inheritance, transference of property, very limited things. Very, very limited things. But we have kept that in exactly the same idea of what was family law then in the 18th century. And it's interesting that when Warren Hastings is doing this, later, very soon, the governor of Bombay is saying, no, we can't do this. Okay? So this we have retained, and these are the questions in front of us. Legal pluralism, as I said, people think, oh, so good. You're giving rights to individuals and you're giving rights to collectives. And I, as an individual citizen, have the right to choose between the two in matters pertaining to family law or personal law. Okay, so I, as a citizen, independent citizen, I can decide, which we all know. Like, it's not as if I have to marry under the Hindu law. So it's my choice that I marry, under Hindu law, or I marry under normal civil law. So all of us as citizens have these rights. It's only the conundrums tell us the problems of something that seems to be so wonderful. When you tell people that we have equality and this, and we have, again, legal equality and legal pluralism. So this is the point. So which way do we go? Right? You cannot say that all collective rights are necessarily terrible for women, so you do away with them. And yet you are aware that in certain cases, the collective rights can then, and which is why she speaks of the dual face, the Janus face of culture, something that I mentioned, that it can be liberating, it can be extremely restrictive. I think I'll stop there. And I gave Flavia Agnes, whom I absolutely admire. She's a lawyer, completely dedicated, working for decades now, with all these, groups, which is why I thought you should see, what she has to say in actual terms, what is happening, legal discourse, because that Protection Act was, we all thought, oh, it's terrible. And what is she showing? I'll just stop there. She's saying that that this terrible law, which was brought in to keep Muslim women post Shah Bano outside the purview of the Uniform Code, actually has helped Muslim women much more, divorced Muslim women much more than what the Uniform Code can. Why? Because there's a sense of justice and fairness within Islam. And keep this in mind, because it is very important. We'll read Talal Asad tomorrow. Talal Asad said the moment we equate democracy and secularism, meaning that these are the ideals to be followed, we immediately rule out the possibility that there can be democratic arrangements within societies that are not secular. He said we don't even think about that possibility. So this is what, I think for me, Flavia Agnes's work shows very powerfully, because she's a lawyeress and she actually works. I finally met her last year, and who was there? The Vijay Krishna College. Oh no, she's gone. Chutonika. Anyway, that's where I finally met her, and I said I admire her, but she's just angry. Like you tell her, I said, she said, why are people so ignorant? In the sense that, why do they pronounce without caring to find out? In that sense, she said, learn, find out, what these, the statutes say, what the personal law means, what the implications of it. So I'll stop there. So for me, Flavia Agnes's this particular work is very important, because no one else has done. Because after Shah Bano herself retracted, even the women's group that was supporting her, again, we were too young. We were, very much in the. I was also young, but I was an undergrad by then. The Shah Bano thing. No, I was actually. I forgot. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But adult enough to follow the debate and to think about it and reflect on it. The moment Shah Bano retracted, she became a traitor. And as I said, it was only later that the actual serious scholars and activists had to think very seriously about it. And they have come out much more mature. So that is why Nivedita Menon is saying that Uniform Code, of course, it's not a problem. Why don't we take the best features of all the different personal laws that are in circulation and come to a Uniform Code? No one would have any problem with that. But she's saying, why isn't anyone pushing for that? No, because then we will have a diversified Uniform Code in that sense. She said, let's take the best, what we think are the most gender sensitive, the ones that uphold equality or liberty or whatever the most, and from the different personal laws available, and then think of drafting a Uniform Code. So I'll stop there. Now your comments. Yes.
Regarding our constitution, as all of we know this thing, because original constitution that are included the term sequel. Included our original constitution.
Yes.
It was later included in 1976 by something alphabetical socialism. So my question is, my query is, the fathers of our constitution, mainly the Ambedkar, even included this term secular in our constitution. So what are the forces behind the inclusion of this secular term? I can understand socialism, why it was included in our constitution, by inspired by the Russian Revolution and Russia's successful implementation of socialism in Russia. But I cannot understand why later in the year, after 26 years after the implementation of our constitution, why this term have been included in our constitution, the secular.
As I said, I think they were complacent. They thought that we would be naturally secular, whatever sense of the secular they had.
Lots of provisions have been already included in our fundamental rights, right to religion. Lots of articles are there,
yes,
which actually ensures the political, you can say, religious liberty. But what is the use of these terms for inclusion in our constitution, especially in the part of preamble?
I think it was because of the way things were functioning, precisely because of the serious problems arising out of the functioning, actual functioning, both of affirmative action or positive or reservation, and of this, the personal loss. I think that is why it caused serious problems. I think I have to follow it very closely, which is why it was introduced. That was yes.
I think we added this word secular later just to remind ourselves again that we are actually secular, even though we did not use the word secular. We added it later on to remind ourselves that okay, this nation is secular, and the things that's are happening in the name of religion and all. So secular was just a reminder to
I think so. As I'm saying,
ourselves. I think.
initially
Because
there
we've
was no
always
need
been
for it.
secular,
That's what,
which is why this was not included, because
Yes.
we took it for granted that this is how we look at things.
that's what I'm saying. I think they were complicit about it. They said there was no need because we will be naturally secular, and because of the way things went over the next 20, 30 years, that they probably felt it was needed. But we have to follow those debates. We have to follow, because it's a major thing that you add something to the preamble of the Constitution. I don't think anyone has actually worked on that or written on that as to why and when and how the word name it, to be added. Do you have any? Yes.
Actually, written in 2006, EPW article about this.
Mhm.
So it's also post inclusion of Sikkim.
Mhm.
Remember, it was a Buddhist kingdom.
Mhm.
So you had a Sangha seat. You actually have the Buddhist monasteries electing a representative in the Sikkim Legislative Assembly. So we also have to understand secularism has not been defined. It is something which is open to continuous interpretation by the parliament and the courts of India.
Yes.
And it is not the Western notion of secularism where politics and religion is divorced. It is about equal rights of every community to practice, profess, preach, maintain its own cultural integrity, religious or ethnic. So secularism is not about the Western concept of religion should not enter into politics. No, it is about the state is going to be impartial. It is going to allow legal pluralism.
Mhm.
And certain states like Kashmir, Nagaland, Sikkim, remember Article 371F. So a lot of these ethnic nationalities had to be accommodated, and they had to be given a sense that your cultural rights will not be undermined after your inclusion into India.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
There's a 2006 article by me in the EPW if you want to read.
So yes, thank you. And the other important point which we don't bring up at all, we started with the idea of a republic. We've almost forgotten it. Why? How? What do you think? Bring it up again. What meant when I said that the idea of consensus or the idea of majority was not in that sense a clearly defined in the majority, the public. Hence, we the people of India. We the people of India. We have come together to give to ourselves, and that the Constitution had tremendous significance. Rajiv Bhargava points to a very important thing which we often overlook, which I like. She said it made us into the people of a book in a very different sense. So if you think of secular in that sense, we were secular because we, the people of India, with all religions, faiths, different backgrounds, different classes, different everything. That was the idea of the Republic. And I think there's a lot to be saved there, salvaged there, particularly now. We have forgotten that almost completely. We the people of India, we the people of India, we are the ones, right? We are not, we are everyone. Which, as you know, it's that way it encompasses, but it also surpasses the idea of the nation, the republic. Yes.
Then, ma'am, why didn't we get rid of those criminal tribes which the British came up with? I mean, it was still 1967 was there, right? and the treats also. We also kind of, fell for it. Where we said that we will not give jobs to them.
Yes. These are pathologies. Once constructed, not very easy to get rid of. Right?
Why is it so?
I don't know. We have to ask ourselves precisely how does each and every society, construct delinquency or the figure of the criminal? These are very important, questions to ask. Because we do have certain, as you know, we do have, an inclination to immediately pinpoint, certain groups, certain people, even now.
One work will be the showers, and another also will be the bediyas,
Yes.
which Anusha
Yes.
Agarwal has worked.
Yes. But now more on the readings, please, because as I said, they are both extremely, yes. Yes, Prithvi. No, person to, yeah, sorry, Prithvi.
Like, there was actually this Vinata's article. There was a point that she talks about the minorities and how the definition of minorities is very difficult. And she gives in 1950 minority and the discrimination, the discussion that was then. That she gave 3 points were there. First point were the rights for the minority. The third was like have to respect, and the second one, and the third one was that given the rights to the minority has to accept the legitimacy of the state.
Yes.
So in a way, it was not like, okay, I am giving you the rights. You have to accept my position as the head of the social structure that I am at the top. So so I want to bring in the Anna same point, like where she says like the roads give you the space for movement, but in a way it also restricts your movement.
Of course, absolutely.
So in a way, giving rights to them, in a way they were restricting them from some other rights as well.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So having a two-side.
Yes. And the same way with culture, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And the other thing that we forget, what Vinadas points out, and others also, there are other very good works on, the Muslim personal law and stuff. One is that, generally in Hinduism and Christianity, marriage is thought to be for life. Right? We all know till death do us part and forever. In Islamic law, it's a contract. It's a contract which may or may not work, and precisely because of that, you have that money saved up, which you pay a bit at the beginning, and if it gets dissolved, then you pay the money that's left over. But if it's a contract and both of them are free to marry again, which is why this alimony is not thought of. Okay. So that we forget completely. Right. And the triple talaq, I couldn't follow the debate here very closely. The other misconception, and Flavia Agnes was bringing it up. Do you know that you cannot say talaq? I said, I know, but tell the others. Why? Because you have to say the 3 talaqs, at least over 3 months, 3 lunar months. You cannot say like you turn towards Makkah and say talaq, 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 and you cannot do it. Precisely the idea is it has to be, 3 lunar months have to pass. In that time, family, friend, whoever, they're trying to negotiate, and it's only when it's, of course, everything can happen. People take things in their own hands, but it's a very common misconception. And which, even the men who were doing triple talaq, they were doing the same thing, of course, So, but that's one more thing we forget. So when we said, during Shabana, when we said that, it's terrible, Sharia is so terrible because it doesn't think of alimony. The other important thing we forget is that because it's a let's say a relationship or a ritual for life in Hinduism, the idea is that you cannot actually remarry, that you lose rights, etc., which is terrible, which the Hindu law brought. Again, it's a very upper caste norms. We know, sort of has worked on Chhattisgarh, Odisha is less rare, but among groups, but I haven't worked among them. Secondary marriages were very common. They're called chudi marriages. You do a marti jiti bhat, meaning that, she's dead, the woman is dead to the first husband, but she's also jiti. She's now alive for the second one. Marti jiti bhat. So the new husband has to treat the family and members of the other one and give bangles, not the elaborate rituals, but Judy marriage. And secondary marriages were very common. And so I said it was common even, like a little before he was doing fieldwork. So it's not as if, it's just something from very old and, gone. We forget all that. But because of that, because it's like something for life, and we always say that we get married into a family. And we never say that, we marry that person. We marry into a family. The entire idea of carrying on the and the line of the husband, the matrilineal family of the husband, etc., etc. So because of that, the idea is that if the woman cannot maintain herself, after she becomes a widow or her husband leaves her, not just the husband, someone has to take care to prevent vagrancy and destitution. And often the implication is she should not turn towards prostitution out of necessity. We forget all these, underlying implications. So it's not as if, it was something brilliant, thinking of women, all these people, with bleeding hearts for women who came up with the provision of alimony. That's also something else we have to keep in mind, and which is very clear in the case of Shabano. What was the money she was given? 173 rupees in the 80s. In the 1980s, which was, of course, it was a different India, but it wouldn't have, made her sustain herself for more than a week even then. And if she had to run her, entire thing herself, right? So we forget all that. To say that, the Uniform Code gives this alimony has the provision for alimony, and that is what Flavia Agnes's work is pointing with great force, pointing at. That this much maligned act through which divorced Muslim women were brought outside the purview, actually through very sensitive lawyers and judges who are arguing in favor of this Islamic idea of fairness and justice, they have got much better deals, many of them. And she's also very right. She said, why is it that there was absolutely no media coverage of that? So that's why I thought I'd include these two, because Abhishek was like, do you want Flavia Agnes? Yes, I want Flavia Agnes. That's so that, I wanted you to read the, because as I said, she's someone who's been working for years and years and years with groups, underprivileged groups. Now your comments. Sorry, I know it's, no, we have time. Please. Yes, please. Mani, I got you.
This is too needed for me to understand. Flavia Agnes's work I found it a bit.
Yes, but now I've kind of brought out the,
One of the things which I felt that by media movement, and this is just an observation, because it was also within Congress government's, this was the time of serious electoral politics and serious vote bank agendas were also associated with the Shabano case, if I'm not wrong. When they wasn't it so?
no, I think it what you decide
Muslim
to.
vote bank, wasn't it for the Muslim vote bank, and under Congress pressure that the Shabano ruling was also overturned. This is what I had been feeling very confident.
Not completely overturned, but yes, we had another act come into force. Yes and no. Yes, it was to a large extent, Rajiv Gandhi's political immaturity, no doubt about that. But the thing is, he also allows the lock of the temple in Ayodhya to be broken at that time. So it's like swinging this way, swinging that way, he did wrong. So we should not overlook that as well. That is precisely the time when the lock is broken and image miraculously appears immediately overnight. So yes, it is that. But the point they're saying is Shah Bano was not the first time that a divorced Muslim woman had reverted to the uniform code to ask for alimony. So there were other cases before which had gone completely unobserved, uncommented upon. So that's what they're saying. And second, when she's saying that when actually divorced Muslim women are getting good deals within the purview of this much maligned law, which we all thought was terrible. You're right, absolutely. That was the idea that he swings this way and then he swings that way. But no one. That's what she's saying. That no one. That's why she said nobody cares to find out. No one cares to find out because we are not interested. The heat of the moment is the sensationalism. And she's showing 3 cases where 2 of them are not related to Muslims at all, and yet how they come up is also going to be of coverage and how we project what. Vinadas, even if you found Flavia Agnes too legalistic. But she writes very, it's like the prose is not difficult at all.
I had to actually search for all the sections that she mentioned. So for her, it's very commonplace. For her, I had to keep
Yes,
it
that of
because
it.
she's constantly referring to these.
Yes. See, she's a lawyer and she's quite serious. She would be definitely 70 now. She's been working since the time of Shah Bano, you can imagine. And, obviously it's commonplace for her. She knows the laws. Yes. But Veena Das, as I say, she also raises some very important questions. No? I thought it's gender, it's uniform code. I thought we'll have much more debate. Why? No? Questions, comments on the readings? You could just also point to certain things in the readings that you agree with, do not agree with. Yes.
It's from India, Vinadas talks about the role of state in the foundation of Indian culture. And even Uday Singh Mehta also brings in like how culture is like how culture mobilizes people in a way. So wanted to draw some connection but wasn't able to. It was a bit lost.
No, see, culture and community. Vinadas' very important work is also that she's saying that often, we pose the community, which is very clear in Patra Chatterjee also. This community as something, this really wonderful thing, not the community of the nation, but other communities, which is in opposition to the state. If the state is controlling, then the community, is a space for liberation. What Vinadas is trying to show here also, cultural rights through that, what the community can do to an individual member. She's saying the element precisely of coercion and through which you make others conform. It's very, very clear in the Shah Bano case. Or even, Luke Mawar, as she said, we'll never know, what led her to commit certainly. But she, in the case of the Sikh, militancy, she's pointing out she's saying how individual biographies become social texts. And what does she mean by that? She's saying that, memories, experiences that do not fit into this narrative of, constant sacrifice, constant martyrdom, they are completely silenced. That's why I began with, Michel Rolfe of, how, silencing the past, what you narrate, what you don't narrate. So she says that, a community, in order to assert itself, often, the connection is that often asserts, or often uses the same forms of epistemic or other violence to assert itself as a community, like the state. That is an important argument she makes, which most people wouldn't like, obviously. But she's saying, let's just see, what's happening when community. So, the problems you were discussing, talking about this, how you assert your identities, communities, keep this in mind. The elements you were bringing it up, in discussions. I'm saying, it's precisely that.
Another thing is interesting how she says that even state legitimizes our death.
Yes.
So even after death, so it is state who plays that key role to legitimize. And it is also a bit contextual to the word Miami because Nachnis are, Korea's Nachnis are, as they are untouchable. So after death, they are thrown as a, they're never touched. So they are dragged with the rope and thrown.
But now?
This is 2006 incident which I'm talking about. So very much now, which is 10, 11 years back. So, which is also important that how, and I remember reading another work also, so in the streets of China, like, so how this, when they cannot, death is so much legitimized. So when they cannot, say who died, so they just dump the body on the street. Okay, so it becomes state's responsibility to remove it because it's so populated, and there is no way who can tell that who died and who killed them.
Yes.
At the very beginning, of the article, she talks about partition. The partition, and as the topic was like gender and politics in India, and she talks about partition, like how abducted women were, like how women. So we talk about state.
Yes.
But when during partition, it was a negotiation was done between Pakistan and India to bring back our women. So in a way, when we talk about state, the state's rights are given to each individual, each and every individual, right? The moment it comes to gender, then there comes the dichotomy. Okay, she's a woman, he is a man. Because abducted women who got married and got settled across border, they were brought back because the main notion was that we need to bring back our women, our sisters, back to our homeland. And then, our daughters as well.
But it is a question of shame. I mean, we didn't know it was pride or shame because many of those women didn't want to come back because they knew they wouldn't be accepted by their families. It didn't happen.
Then how whether a woman can be called a citizen of a state in the real sense. So that comes into
absolutely, and which is why I'm saying she's raising questions about the individual, what kind of individual, and Rajeshwari Sundara, if you want to raise, she's talking precisely about that. That even when we say equality, which is why the liberal equality has come under so much kind of criticism, scrutiny from particularly for feminist scholars. Under modern regimes, the ways you are constituted as citizens, men and women, they are very different, and the expectations, of you, of the state, of the society, are also very different. So now people are speaking of differential citizenship, but it is not just with women, yes, but they also say nominal citizens. There's so much clamor with the partition, the words on partition. They're saying that some argument citizenship is immediately, but immediately. And then people get angry with that, and they say it's just citizenship in name. Nominal citizenship, they are not actually given any of the rights or entitlements to which let's say a citizen of India is entitled to. But that absolutely. So she is talking about the individual and the collective, and even within the collective, what happens when there's tremendous tension between, as I said, is dependence. That's why she is speaking of the war. That is the entire system, is interdependent. You cannot think of one unit or the caste as separate from the other. So she's saying the same thing of collective rights, that even as an individual, your right, your personal or the right to, let's say, your cultural rights is dependent on your membership of a particular collective or community. And she's saying these are all filiative communities. So you're talking of women and choice, that's the point she raises. What if, Shabano or Ruka or anyone else said that I do not want to belong to this filiative, meaning this community that has been ascribed to me, and I want to belong to a community which I choose, which can be a community of women, which can be a community of anything. And she says, no rights has any answer to that. Liberal rights, we do not have any answer to that. And we haven't even thought of that. What do we do?
I'm
Yes.
quite skeptical of her use of the term to the section of people who belong to which she referred as outside culture. For example, she mentioned about mad people, and in this connection, she has drawn from Foucault's Prisons and Asylum. So, in what sense is she defining as the section of people who belong to outside culture, which she refers to?
She's calling, taking it, of course, ironically. Yes, absolutely. In that sense, outside culture meaning not normal, outside the norm. Outside the norm. And then I think it's Arjuna, but I forgot it. Someone mentions this, that the fact that censuses were going on in England too around the time the censuses started in India, but it was only for the poor, the marginal characters, let's say, to control them. That was the idea. So the fact that it is applied to the entire population of India tell you something about what they thought of us and how they felt that all of us have to be categorized, classified, and brought under control, brought under vigilance. If you're talking about support, but it's in that sense. Okay, so she's using it very critically, the outsider, like the not normal. And now more and more we are moving towards questioning how and when and how long will it take for the norms to become norms. I think these are questions we have to ask us. Again, no clear answer. But when and how, norms didn't become, they became norms. The need to conform, the need to fall in line, etc., etc. Yes.
Can we actually differentiate cultural rights from political rights? Like Reena Das in this article mentions that cultural rights are different from political rights, but can we really segregate these two rights? I just wanted to know.
Yeah, see, cultural rights, as I said, they are, at least in the case of India, they only refer to the personal laws, which, as I said, form a very small part of either civil or criminal law. So in that sense, yes, but it depends on where and how you apply the notion of cultural rights.
Interpretation is also
Yes.
So voting will be only the political right?
Probably. I don't know if right to education, employment, no, those are fundamental rights.
Privacy,
No more comments, observations? Okay, thank you very much. So tomorrow, Abhishek, 10:30 to 11:30, then a 15-minute break for what?
Yeah.
Okay. And then quarter to 12 to 1 and we are done. Okay, fine. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.